Hello.
Hey, Kate.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. Happy Friday.
A beautiful day today, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's nice.
Much better than yesterday.
Yeah. I know some folks are still connecting to audio, but just want to welcome those of you who are here. And if it is possible for you to come on camera, we would love that. Love to see your faces. We try to have an intimate dialogue here. So seeing faces is much easier to engage and makes it more personal. However, we understand that that's not possible for everybody, but we would love to see your faces if you can. I'm just going to give one more minute. And then Lauren, if while I'm talking, if people come into the... Hi, Darlene. If people come into the waiting room, would you mind letting them in?
Yeah.
We're doing sign language. Gotcha. All right. We're going to get started here today. So I just want to welcome all of you. My name is Rebecca Castano. I lead our Emerging Leaders Society, ELS for short, a local group of young professionals. We partner with United Way to make a difference in our community. And a lot of that is done through personal and professional development, fundraisers, volunteer experiences, and we just have a lot of fun together. So we'll throw a link in the chat for how you join and get involved if you're not already an ELS member. And you can follow us on social and check out our website and contact me, and we'll throw all that information in the chat. But a huge part of making an impact is developing as leaders, and all of us lead in some capacity. Even if we don't have people directly reporting to us, we are all leaders. So I love the quote, "A smart person learns from their mistakes and a wise person learns from another's mistakes." And I believe that that also translates for successes. So ELS has 3 principles. We listen, educate, and innovate. And this is really the heart of Lunch with a Leader, this series where we get to engage with an influential leader who is local to listen and learn and ask questions. And a huge part of learning is asking questions. And so we try to create an intimate and interactive space where we can learn from the experience of seasoned leaders who are right here in our own community. So today we are in for a real treat. I'm thrilled to introduce you to today's moderator, Lauren LaChance. Lauren is the public relations manager for ConnectiCare and WellSpark Health, which is part of the EmblemHealth companies. And she began as an intern and was eventually hired full-time at ConnectiCare and has now been working there for almost 3 years. And I remember working on one of her first projects, when we were doing the case competition event for the winning team back in the beginning of 2020. So it's nice to see Lauren here today, and she'll be leading us in the conversation. Lauren received her bachelor's in communication from Western New England University and her master's in public relations from Quinnipiac. She has 2 golden doodles, Hudson and Finn, and enjoys hiking and cooking in her spare time. Lauren is also getting married in under 60 days. So congratulations to Lauren.
Thank
And
you.
I'll turn it over to you to take it from here.
Thanks, Rebecca. That was a great introduction. I am so happy to be here with all of you. And on behalf of ELS, just thank you so much for joining us for Lunch with a Leader today. This event is meant to foster an interactive dialogue, so I definitely encourage all of you to ask questions by either typing them into our group chat. Rebecca and I are keeping an eye on it, or if you prefer, you can use the Zoom function where you get to raise your hand, and then when we call on you, you can unmute yourself and ask a question. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our leader today, Beth Leonard. Beth serves as the Chief Corporate Affairs Officer for the EmblemHealth family of companies, which includes 2 Connecticut-based organizations, ConnectiCare and WellSpark Health. And I just want to point out that Beth is also a part of the EmblemHealth's Bold Collective, which is the organization's Women Employees Resource Group. And she also serves on the Diversity and Inclusion Council, which is responsible for advocating for diversity, equity, and inclusion on behalf of EmblemHealth's employees, members, patients, and vendor relations. And I am thrilled to be having this conversation with you today, Beth. Before we begin, since we are admitting more people, I would love to have everyone just pop in the chat and say their name and where they're from so we can get a good idea of where you are coming from. I'll start. If you have access to the chat. While that's rolling, Beth, I thought we could start off with having you tell us a little bit about your backstory, and then we can take it from there.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you. And thank you all for joining. And it's also good. I quickly scrolled through to see some familiar faces. So my backstory, I will start from the beginning and speak very quickly, not as young as I once was, or some of you on this call. So just starting from current, as Lauren said, I'm the Chief Corporate Affairs Officer for the EmblemHealth family of companies. Essentially what that means is I oversee communications, digital strategy, marketing, government relations, community engagement, philanthropy, and a host of other things. And it's a really exciting portfolio because to me, it's the expression internally and externally of our mission at the EmblemHealth family of companies, which is to create healthier futures for our members, our patients, and the communities we serve. And I start there because, as I think you'll hear, and for those of you who've read my bio, I have a slightly untraditional path to how I got in this seat. And that is one of the things that you'll hear from me today, is I'm a big believer in sort of what appears to be nonlinear, but there's a common thread through it all. I am the daughter of a science and math teacher, although you wouldn't know it because of my math skills or maybe not my best skills. But I was raised in a small town outside of San Diego, and really those same values that I was instilled with, which is work hard. It's about your community and it's about giving back and being the best that you can of your abilities, are those same values that have really carried me to where I am today. I started out as a developmental psychology major, and I really believed I wanted to be a child psychiatrist. And quickly, through working in juvenile hall and group homes, and I was a probation officer, also skills that ironically, people skills have served me well, realized that I probably wasn't the best at just listening. I was much more of an activist, was much more of a change agent, and really a problem solver. I always wanted to get to the, okay, you've had challenges, life is full of challenges, how are we going to overcome them together? Which led me to an internship in Washington, D.C., where I interned at the White House. And when I was at the White House, unfortunately, Columbine happened. And unfortunately, since then, there's been many more instances of, youth gun violence. But at the time, it was really the first time our country had really grappled with a tragedy on that level. And so I really got to understand how issues I was really personally passionate about, mental health, education, could play out on a public policy level. And I really sort of started to begin to understand public policy and that. So I ended up getting my master's in issues management, which is sort of like your MBA for managing issues. Worked at the American Cancer Society and started out media relations and moved over to grassroots. And then from there, moved to Iowa, a state I had never visited, to a place I probably couldn't locate on a map. I was like, it's somewhere in the middle. And I did my first political campaign. And from there, I lived in Iowa. After a successful campaign season there, went to Louisiana. After Louisiana, went back to Iowa. After Iowa, went to Arizona, California, then to Washington, D.C., then to Ohio. There's a reason I'm telling you all this. And then after Ohio, ended up in Washington State because there is a competitive streak in me. And when I left Ohio, we had just lost the presidential election. And if you know anything about politics, Ohio is often a swing state. So it was pretty personal. So I went to Washington State to do a recount and hopefully end on a good note. And then I ended up in Boston running a re-election for a very long-serving mayor of Boston. From there, I ended up serving as his chief of staff at the Boston Redevelopment and Economic Development Authority. Then I went to New Hampshire, did another campaign, and after that said, okay, I'm ready to do something a little different, and took that same sort of advocacy and grassroots and went to go work for AHIP, which is America's Health Insurance Plans, which represents in DC all the health insurers and is their advocacy organization. And it was the lead up to healthcare reform. So I was hired specifically to help prepare the industry from a grassroots standpoint to be a partner and earn a seat at the table for healthcare reform. I stayed through the debate, the implementation, and then about 6 years ago, joined EmblemHealth. So there you go. And I'm also the wife of a disabled combat veteran and a dog mom to 2 dogs.
Thank you. It's very impressive. I think you mentioned to me once that you've lived in over 50 places, I believe.
Yes.
Either just you or between you and your husband.
50 just me and 50 with my husband. So 100.
So you mentioned the word challenges a few times. And I think a place I'd love to start is it's been about 2 years since we had the COVID-19 pandemic. And that was extremely challenging for everyone as we sort of transitioned from our normal everyday lives to what I would say is this new normal. When you reflect on who you are as a leader now versus who you were as a leader in February 2022, is there any area of development that you think is most meaningful to you in a personal and professional way?
So I think this is a great question. And as I thought about this question, I realized, and hopefully for some of you that do know me, I wouldn't say ego is the top word, but in my answer to this question, if I'm being completely honest, and I am a really blunt person, is I actually think I was able, so what's changed, everything that has served me well up until now, let me start over, which is putting people first and empathy, which are what I hope to think is my legacy and what has always been a hallmark of my leadership, just became more accepted. So I think it's less about that I really changed, because frankly, I do think that that was always a hallmark of my leadership style. But I think it was that the world around us gave us more permission, and specifically working in the insurance industry, which can be a bit more sort of buttoned up, it gave everyone around us more permission to sometimes start with a personal. How are you doing? We all have challenges every day, whether they're, seen or unseen. And I think the world as itself became a little more comfortable with being comfortable, recognizing that to be a whole person, how you bring yourself to work is also reflective of what challenges may be going on in your life. And so to me, what was most exciting was to one, even, as a leader, if you're the only one sort of leading with some of that all the time, that can be a bit isolating. You can start to question whether that's the right leadership skill for the place that you're at. So for me, it was exciting to see other colleagues start to ask those questions. And I think if anything, just gave me further permission and emboldened to go back to the very things that had served me well over the course of my career.
That's a really good point. I think when I immediately think of practice what you preach. And I think that you do weave that into your everyday with your team. Even when we meet, you are always asking personal and professional questions. And I do feel that that is very important, especially in the pandemic, because life does happen during work hours. And you have to be able to sit down with your boss and, have that frank conversation when something is happening that may be affecting your focus at work. As Has your perspective or your approach to inspiring your team, now that most of us are in a hybrid since the pandemic, changed at all? How do you stay connected and keep everyone sort of encouraged and focused?
I think certainly that's become more or less of a challenge, right? I'm definitely glass half full, and I think there's a lot of really benefits. I've loved being able to get to know people more fully, meaning when I get to see someone on video and I see a picture in the background or a dog come through or a child, it's an opportunity to learn a little bit more about them and their full life that they're bringing to the work. And I think it's always really important to remember too, and I tell the team this all the time, we're not selling shoes and there's nothing wrong with selling shoes, but the work we do is really personal. And at the point that it becomes impersonal, or you forget who we're really serving and what we're trying to do, which is make sure that folks have a financial safety net when they're potentially dealing with the worst news or a big struggle, then to me, that's when you should probably move on. And this might not be the right place for you, regardless of where you sit and what your sort of job is. So for me, the staying connected not only to who we serve, but therefore to the team members was really important, but you had to be a lot more intentional about it. And I think what's great about the department that I lead is that community engagement and philanthropy are a part of our sort of day jobs, in addition to something that we get the pleasure of doing. So being able to encourage all team members, regardless of whether they work on the community engagement or sort of that team, to come out as we're giving back to the community and serving our members and continuing to do those events through the pandemic, but inviting the whole team to come. And then trying to also be conscious and remove any barriers is that I need to be really explicit about saying, hey, if you do come to an event, I'm going to cover your Uber cost. Or, we're going to take care, because public safety, especially in New York City, also became more of an issue. So always trying to sort of, it goes back to those basic rules and why I started with, how I was raised, which is walk in somebody else's shoes. Maybe they don't know that they're allowed to take a couple of hours to come meet Kim at a community event, or go by a CCI retail center and meet some of their colleagues, or maybe just take their laptop and work from there for the day because they're feeling a bit lonely in their studio apartment, right? And tired of talking to the dog. So I think it was needing to be recognizing my own privilege of what my title brings, and trying to ensure that I'm remembering what it was like when I was starting out, and not assuming that I could take a cab and have it be expensed, but also knowing my budget was extra tight that month. And so trying to be really much more deliberate, not just about here are the opportunities and let's create them. I do new hire virtual lunches. As you said, I'm active in our ERGs and other activities, but trying to really be a bit more conscious about those things that might not be barriers to me, but could be barriers to somebody else working somewhere else in the organization to get together. And hopefully that made some sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have a ton of questions that I can ask, but I just wanted to pause to see if anyone had a question that they wanted to drop in the chat, or if you'd like to unmute yourself. I definitely want to encourage everyone to ask Beth as many questions as you'd like. You can even raise your hand and I can call on you. Don't see anyone yet. All right, I guess we'll keep going and
Okay.
we'll see how it goes. So you had mentioned just reflecting on your younger self and putting yourself in the shoes of maybe a younger employee, and it's made me a bit curious. You have a very diverse background, and I'm wondering, how, as a young professional, did you stay motivated along the way in your journey? I'm sure that you had expectations for your career goals, and there were times when you found that they didn't pan out the way you had hoped. So I'm curious how you stayed motivated, stayed focused on your goals, even when maybe you just kind of felt like you were having a bad moment. I know you mentioned that you lost the presidential campaign when you were in Ohio. So I'd really love to hear sort of maybe even how you stayed motivated through that moment as well.
Yeah, no, all great questions, and we could spend a lot of time talking about this one. So I think a couple of things, and recognizing we're all different, but you know, I'm here to share my story with you and be pretty blunt about it. So the truth is, turn off the noise. You got to turn off the noise, just like you read the studies and sort of your personal lives. That if you spend all day long on social media and just following sort of influencer accounts where everyone's using filters, and you start to doubt, like, oh my God, I didn't think I looked bad, but now I'm questioning this, or whatever it is, we can spend all day long comparing. So yes, LinkedIn's a useful tool. Yes, forums are incredible, but I can't implore you enough. And this may sound harsh. There's always going to be someone smarter, more attractive, more, quote, well-educated, luckier, more well-connected, whatever it is. There's always going to be someone in life. And so I think that the earlier you can really say, how do I find my quiet? What is important to me? I look back, and I will be honest, I never in a million years thought I would be working for a company in New York City, sitting in the C-suite. That would have terrified me. So for me, it's the incremental goals, much like, and I'd love to say this is a recent example, but, you know, not, because, you know, life's a struggle and this is my struggle. But once upon a time, you know, when I started to decide I was gonna run, right? And it was like, all right, I'm gonna do 30 minutes of a run. Well, if I set out that day and started from 0 to 30 minutes, I would have never finished, because maybe, unlike some of you, I'm just not that motivated when it comes to exercise. So instead it was like, all right, I just 30 more seconds. And then when I got to the 30 more seconds, it's like 30 more seconds, right? And you bite-sized chunks to get to the end. So for me, it was always about this sort of incremental, I'll be honest, for me, it was never a certain title. It was never a certain, there were just certain, I knew I wanted to be a leader of people at one point, right? I want to have a direct report. It was never like, I need to have 10. It was just, and so it was these incremental goals. So I think for me, also staying really, really grounded, right? I'm the daughter of a teacher. My father throughout our life was sort of intermittently employed, and you know, we had enough, and I had a great childhood, and I adore my parents, but it comes back to, do I have a roof over my head? Can I pay my bills? Because at the same time, we're comparing ourselves to people who are maybe shinier, or, you know, they're CEOs at whatever age. There's also people who are just struggling to make ends meet and put food on their table. So for me, it was always coming back to, you know, am I able to do the things in my life that are really fundamental and appointment? Yep, I have a roof over my head. I'm able to put gas in my car. And I can, if I save and I'm careful, I can take that trip I want. And travel is and always has been important for me. And so I think it's just, regardless of where I've gotten, if all of this were taken away from me tomorrow, would that be a hit to my ego? Would that be really difficult? Would I miss certain things? Absolutely. And I'm sure I would be sent in a spiral. But at the end of the day, could I hold my head high and walk away with the clothes on my back, the love of my husband and family, hopefully enough to feed the dogs? And if I had to, you know, go get a job at IKEA, which provides health insurance, okay, great. Because for me, there's nothing, you know, better about what I do versus someone who's getting up every day and you know, working there. And I think that's something that I've had lots of odd jobs in between all the ones that I mentioned to you all in order to make ends meet. And so for me, it's, you're always one step away from that. So I don't mean to be sort of negative. I meant it more as a positive, which is, I think sometimes it's really easy to get caught up, especially in maybe even a more remote environment when we're kind of watching TV, in the titles, in the, just make it incremental, make it digestible. But also at the end of the day, it sometimes isn't about that. I took a pay cut when I came to Emblem. I took a title change. I was an executive vice president before I came here. Now this is a different scope and a different thing, but on paper, everyone told me I was crazy. The EmblemHealth family of companies was not in financial good place 6 years ago, right? And you sort of, again, had to block out the noise and say, but there's elements of this job that speak to me. We're
Right.
not for profit. We have in-person retail centers. We do community engagement. That's something I want to be a part of. And so it was my ability to block out the noise. And guess what? It also turned out to be a really great career move because I followed my gut and I was able to turn out the noise. So I believe there's a lesson in there. And that's something that I'm constantly coming back to for myself.
I think that's a really great point to turn off the noise. And you said, follow your gut. I think when I meet with senior leaders, even just over coffee, something they always say is like, follow your intuition, you know what you're doing. And, you know, as long as you're taking in the advice and sort of following what you think is best for you, most of the time it will work out. I also just want to say one of the things that drew me to ConnectiCare and the family of companies was how involved we are in the community, and we really do give back a lot. It makes the work that we do so much more gratifying at the end of the day. There are several questions in the chat that I can see coming in.
I'm ready.
So Darlene asks, how do you manage making decisions about new professional opportunities? It's scary to change or try something new.
So as evidenced by my varied career, I'll say again, it's about gut. Yes, you have to make sure that, the basics, right, is the position commiserate with what I believe I'm worth and the experience, and you have to make those decisions, of course. But for me, it's, once again, I want to chart my own path, and you got to believe in yourself that it'll work out. And what are the elements of the job? At the end of the day, we spend way too many hours doing work for it not to speak to you in some ways. So for me, the evaluation has always come down to, will I be proud of the work I'm doing? And do I believe I can make an impact? And that's been the litmus test. And again, it hasn't followed a sort of normal path. Now I can carve the narrative together. And I was like, yeah, actually, looking back, there were a lot of elements that were all the same. But for me, that's been the evaluation. I do tell folks, and I realize not everyone is in a position to be able to move. I do think early on, that was very much a part of being able to take opportunities. I was open to what's the worst that happens. I move somewhere and I hate it and it doesn't work out. Okay, right? I'm going to give it a good shot. And, it turns out I really liked New Hampshire. Turns out Boston was really, really cold and I cried a lot because I was just so cold waiting for the bus. Right. So there's different things, but I wouldn't have known any of that, right, if I hadn't have taken those opportunities. So I think the evaluation for me at the end of the day is, again, you turn off the noise when you're quiet. Does the work or the place you're working, because I'll also speak to that, there are times where I've taken a role that I know I was maybe overqualified for, which is typical of females often. Not saying a golden rule, but often. But I didn't look at it as a negative. I looked at it as, well, I just want my foot in the door because I really want to be a part of this, and then the rest will come. I use a story. When I took the job at EmblemHealth, I was the chief communications and marketing officer of one of our brands. I now have the pleasure of leading enterprise and government relations and community are a part of that portfolio where they weren't on day one, because I took a shot in that, no, this is an organization I want to be part of. If I prove myself, if I work hard, the rest will come. So I think for me, it's again, yes, evaluating compensation and all of that, but at the end of the day, really, again, going to the gut and saying, do I want to wake up every day and work with these people, alongside these people, and in this organization? Because we all know that's a big barometer of success too, right? You can do a lot if the people you're alongside of are aligned with you, and you can have the best title and the biggest paycheck in the world, but if you're working with assholes every day, like, here's the thing, you can teach people how to do the next job. You can teach people the skills most often, right? Maybe we can't all become actuaries, but you can teach people good skills. You can't unteach asshole. And that's something I also learned early on. So for me, who do I want to be alongside with, right? That's
Right.
important. Excuse me, was I allowed to say that word? Sorry.
I
Hope
think
that's
it's
okay.
fine. Well, and it's true. Nancy asks, being remote technology can either help or hinder a team's connection. What advice do you give leaders for how they can use digital tools to stay engaged with employees and boost team morale?
Great question. I think this is still a work in progress because I think we all have different styles. Like, I'll be honest. I mean, I'll tell you my age. I'm not great at text message. I'm not great at IM. It's like I see it and then I'm like, okay, great, alert. I should look at my email. Right. So we all, I still think, have to recognize there's a lot of tools. We can have tool overload. You still have to sort of recognize what tools work for people. I do think video can be exhausting. Like, is it normal that I'm talking to all of you and I'm literally staring at myself? No, unless I was a personal trainer who, by the way, is like paid to look good and stare at myself all day. Like, this isn't normal, right? Like, you can't think this doesn't mess with you in some way. However, I do think, to the extent you are in a place where you can be on video, and I also think it's a good test of all of us being comfortable with, yeah, it doesn't mean you have to wear a suit and tie every day. Be comfortable in your space, right? Like, put on a team's background if you're not loving what's happening behind you at the moment, but there's a humanity to it that you, by the way, would have happened if you were in person anyways. If you're having a bad hair day, that would have happened in the office too. So stop stressing about it on video. So I would encourage, and I do encourage, to the extent possible, that people do show up on video, even if they're not feeling their best that day. Because I do think without that, it is harder to connect. But I do think we have to be more intentional about, we're not going to run into each other while we're getting coffee or while we're on our way to the bathroom. So you kind of almost also have to set up those times. And I do think, Nancy, I often think about, instead of sending an email, can I just call Kim real quick? Let's just call and connect. Because otherwise maybe it's going to be a whole week and I'm not actually going to quote see her, because again, we're not passing each other in a hall. So like everything in life, I think it's about being a bit more intentional. And it's something I'm still working on. And I know coming into this year, I asked my team to hold me accountable for making sure that we're having regular department meetings, other kind of forums that are bringing us together, because it's sometimes easier in this environment to just forget about those things. So
I was thinking as you were speaking, and it's a bit of a follow-up question. What are some of the positives that you think have come out of a lot of companies maybe adapting hybrid or fully remote workplaces? Do you think that it affects how employees interact day to day, and how do you think it gets rid of stress? I know that when we were all in the office, there were some days where you may not be feeling well and you were worried about missing work, and now we have this option where we can stay home. I'm just curious if you think there were any other positives that sort of came out of an unfortunate couple of years.
yeah, I think and I can compare Connecticut a little bit to New York in some ways too. In certain environments, there's a really high cost of living, or the average commute. One of the members of our team for 30 years commuted 2.5 hours each way. Imagine that, right? So that's 2.5 hours, or I'm sorry, 5, right? That she just got back to be able to take a walk or to do something else. So for me, it's the flexibility. I don't think, I've always done really well operating in gray. And again, I think that's probably a hallmark of the organizations and the jobs I've chosen to do. And it doesn't mean that I'm not decisive. I'm incredibly decisive, but I like a little bit of gray. I like helping sort of mold. So for me, where we're at now, which is, if you want to come in person, absolutely, you need that structure, recognizing that some of us do work better a little bit, or our living situation is that we're not in a place where we have a dedicated workspace, right? We're working off our bed in a bedroom, whatever it may be. So for me, it's there's something for everyone. It's like, if you want to work remote, great. If you want to come into an office and have a desk, we have that option for you as well. And we still, I mean, at Emblem Health family of companies, we have a huge portion of our employees who don't have that choice. They work in a retail center, they're in sales, or they're a provider or a nurse, and nothing changed for them. And so I think it's just important to recognize that that there's a little bit more choice for some, not for all, and that choice is great. And hopefully, what I also hope is that it relaxed. For me, it's not coming into the office that was necessarily odd, although I appreciate this flexibility. For me, Steve, prior experience, I've always worked in more untraditional. I worked on political campaigns. We were never in a suit and tie every single day. Some days, not every day. So for me, the like having to wear pantyhose and high heels every day, like that was frankly more exhausting than having to get on the subway. So I'm thrilled that we're able to be a little more authentic, and you can choose to do that or choose not to. So for me, it's sort of the best of all worlds. And then there's still obviously community events, and then we're deliberate. We have executive and senior leadership meetings once a month in person, and so that's a week once a month that we're all in person. And I do think some of that connection is important, because again, you just have to be a little more intentional about it.
Definitely. How have you established like a work-life balance, work-life satisfaction? And has there been moments where that's been a struggle? I know as a young professional myself, and this is a conversation that we have all the time when our team gets together, is work-life balance isn't as simple as it sounds. So I would love to hear sort of how you have established that over time.
I don't have it. I said I was going to be honest.
Good to be honest.
I think work-life balance is a bit of bullshit. Like, once again, you're setting yourself up for failure. Life is ebbs and flows, just like in your personal life, just in your work life. And work life is just a reflection of life, right? You don't get to separate it. Some days it would be easier. Life is ups and downs. Life has ebbs and flows, right? Like, I can look back and be like, at this period of my life, I was in the best shape of my life and I was eating healthy. And then, my dad got sick and had an accident, and I was flying back and forth to the West Coast a bunch, and the exercise sort of slipped a bit. Ebbs and flows. Was I going to beat myself up that I wasn't working out every day? No, because I was spending, I was in a hospital every day trying to continue to work and be there for my family, right? So it had ebbs and flows, right? And then, he got a little bit better and the balance came back, right? So I guess I would say, yes, absolutely, it's important. I'm not saying you've got to be all about work or all about, but I think you once again have to acknowledge life is ebbs and flows, and it's like anything, you go through seasons of your life, right? And if you're working towards your goal, your incremental goal is, I absolutely am working for this next promotion, and my supervisor has told me, part of getting that next promotion is I really need to work on taking on a project and getting some more visibility. Then your flow right then, if that's your goal and that's what's right for you, may be, all right, I'm going to need to do a little bit of extra work because I'm stretching myself, but that's really important. And therefore, my my yoga class that I was taking at 5:00 every day, the truth is I'm going to go from 5 days a week to 3 days a week. Doesn't mean abandon it, right? And you've got to stay true to your core values. But at that point, it may ebb and flow. So I think it's sort of similar to what I said earlier. Nobody's perfect. There is no perfect path, right? You've got to find what works for you. I'll be honest, I spent my, early 30s, and I'm going to answer some questions you didn't even ask, but, here I am. So, at 30, I was the chief of staff for the city of Boston. And that was really overwhelming. I was also 30. So yeah, I was working out, I was dating, I had like a pretty fabulous life, right? It was pretty great, right? And looking now at where I'm at, I have a responsibility to the team members I serve, right? So sometimes I don't get to be just completely selfish and say, but I really wanted to like take this Friday off because someone needs me in order to move forward. But I made different decisions. I'll be honest, I met my husband, my late 30s, and he essentially gave up his career to move to New York and help support us. And when I say support us, meaning, and if you're going to meet my husband, right? He's a veteran. He works out a lot. He's a dude's dude. Wait, guess what? He now picks up the dry cleaning and he does the grocery shopping, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but it's part of how we make our balance work, right? And it's part of what enables me to do the work that I'm doing at this point. But I think I would probably, and look, I go through it. I'm human too, right? I wish I were in better shape. I wish I were this, but I think I would just be setting myself up for failure if I was just like, what is the balance? The balance again is what is right for you, right? What is that balance? Not someone else's, what they dictate as work-life balance. So for me, the balance isn't 50-50, but you know what? I'm not trying it to be 50-50. I recognize that for me, the balance is probably like 70-30, but I'm okay with that. And I feel really good about it because I love the work I do. And I'm blessed that I've created a portfolio that I'm passionate about, but I also work alongside people that I really enjoy spending time with. So it doesn't always feel like work. So again, I think I would just amend it to say, come up with your own percentage of what that balance is. And if it's really important for you that you have a life in which life is a bigger balance, then that's awesome. That is my sister. And she's an incredible career, an incredible marriage, incredible 2 kids, and she owns it. And that is awesome. So I think it's just about, again, be honest with yourself. What's important to you? And so I also feel really comfortable telling you all, my balance is not 50-50, but hey, it's my life and it's okay. And I really like that. So I think it's just about what's important to you. And it's also okay if you want your life to be more skewed towards non-work life. That's great. Know that now, start creating a life that reflects that. But I think striving for someone else's balance or equal, once again, I just think you're setting yourself up for failure. And I think also recognizing that it's ebbs and flows. It's a roller coaster. There's going to be periods of your life where you're training for a marathon and you're making that a priority and you're going to pull back a little bit at work, but maybe that's not the year that you're going to get the promotion. That's a-okay. That is absolutely cool. Versus, hey, next year is the year I'm really going to focus on this. And then you ebb and flow a little bit while keeping, some sort of level. So that's the truth.
I really like that advice. And I think that leaves us all with homework after this luncheon today to sort of think about what our balance looks like and less of what everyone else's balance looks like and what we should be emulating. I am thinking as you were speaking, like, what does my balance look like and what is a healthy balance for me in this season of my life? Kate has a question. She says, what attributes stand out when you evaluate talent within your organization?
Oh, that's a great question. So for me, standout is we all have a job, right? There's a job description, there's expectations that are set. And so doing that is what gets you to sort of baseline, right? That's what hopefully is continuing the paychecks and everything else. But if you want to be a standout, to me, it's really about, in some ways, the yes, it means that your work is excellent and that you're going above and beyond whatever your kind of day job is, right? So you volunteered to take on a project, or in working in part of something that's part of your job or a project, you really were a standout leader in the group, right? You helped organize, you helped get it going. You didn't just wait. So there's a proactive nature. You didn't just wait for me to sort of detail exactly how it should be done. You said, hey, here's an approach. Here's how I think it could be done. Or you said to me, hey, Beth, I know you said you'd schedule up the next follow-up meeting, but you know what? Why don't you let me take a shot of kind of a project outline or an agenda? I think that could be helpful. So it's a proactive nature. I think the second one is, how are you showing up? I don't care if you're the smartest person in the room, or you saved the company $10 million, or you had the most brilliant public policy idea, whatever the sort of metrics of how your individual jobs are measured. If you exceeded every measurement, That's still not a standout in my book. And that may be hard, but I think I'm fair. How did you do it? How did you do it? Did you step on everyone to get there? Did you just do the work yourself in a hole and not explain or bring other people along? Did you make other people feel bad in the process because you told them their ideas were stupid and you sort of said, no, I don't need to listen to you? Did you do it without respect for your colleagues and for the organization? How did you do the work? I'm not saying you have to be the most popular person in the room, but did you do it while being a good corporate citizen? Can I look at you and say, hey, Kate is someone who not only got the work done, she took on extra work, but the way she went about it, people felt really good about it, right? People felt like they understood what she was doing. They understood the outcome, right? She was clear in communicating. Everyone understood their rules. She was respectful. She heard their ideas, even if their ideas weren't the winning ideas. And she, either led a process or is a colleague that people are like, yeah, I like working with Kate. I think sometimes the word nice is sort of like undervalued in life, or looked upon as like, oh, that's a nice person, and that somehow translates to weakness or to something else. I think it's really, really important. Are you the person that's involved in extra activities? Can people count on you? So I would say reliability, respect, mutual respect. And again, that's built over time. That's also not a one and done. Are you consistent? Are you consistently performing in whatever the task is at hand? And are you consistently doing the task in a way that you frankly can be proud of? Are you writing the emails that frankly always get back to me and I got to cringe and read between the lines? Or are you the person who, is sending the clear emails, speaking clearly, and you're not going to be someone I'm like, you got to watch your tone, right? Or, this could be interpreted a certain kind of way. That to me is standout. It's the complete package of how you're approaching the work. And I would invest any day in someone who may not have the same experience, may not have, quote, the same credentials, but possess those qualities that I think are moldable any day over someone who may come with a better resume, more experience, but has kind of known, well, that's the girl you kind of got to watch. She can kind of sometimes have an edge to her. Or sometimes, every once in a while, you got to remind her, like, come back over here to our values. I'd pick the first any day.
It's very good advice. Leah also dropped a question in here, and I apologize, I'm looking at the clock. We have about 15 minutes left, so we do have time for one or two more questions. Leah asks, at key turning points in your career, what actions or behaviors moved you closer to your goals? Follow-up question, when you faced opposition, how did you recruit community members to your cause?
Okay, so we have to first, you should all know I'm a visual learner, so not an auditory learner. So I may ask you to repeat the second part first, but the first part was, how did I recover from stumbles?
It says, what actions or behaviors moved you closer to your goals?
Yeah, I think for me, a big part of it was the willingness to take on seemingly thankless tasks. So in every role I've held, I have left the company that I was at or the organization in a higher position than I started. So I am the product of working my way up within an organization. So I think inherently that means that in part, I maybe, and I said this earlier, took on something that I knew I was competent at, but that they needed to get to know me and the full me in order to then create the portfolio that I would eventually want. I am someone who absolutely likes to come into things, and I'm a builder and I'm a change agent. So I look for where nobody else is paying attention. So for example, when I first came to EmblemHealth family of companies, the websites, the public websites were under IT's control. And that inherently didn't make sense to me because I was like, well, that's an external expression of our brand. IT can keep the lights on and make sure that we're not getting, hacked, but like, should they really be deciding the content? That doesn't seem right. So, it wasn't me coming in and saying, well, I'm this, you should give it to me. It was me working alongside of those folks and making a case for, hey, here's the risk that I believe, here's the value we can bring in it, which also meant I was going to have to take on more work. Nobody handed me a budget staff. It was, okay, I'm going to take this on. I'm going to do the work, show them what a modern website can look like, and build the case for then why I should have a digital strategy team that actually then, manages the website, the properties, and why we continue to make investments in sort of modern tools. So for me, I've always sort of taken the approach of do the work, and do the work that someone else may be passing over, either because frankly it's too hard or they don't think it's big enough for them. I think part of the portfolio that's always interesting to me is sort of community, PR, philanthropy. People are like, oh, that's nice to have. That's nice, pat you on the head. Versus me thinking, well, it is a powerful part of a company's brand, is a powerful part of your PR machine, of the mission, of frankly, even recruiting employees to come work here because they want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. It is an important part of government relations, and government relations is important because we work in a highly regulated industry. Like, duh, it's important, people. But hey, if everyone wants to think it's just a nice to have, great. We'll go do the work. We'll go do meaningful work. And from it, we're going to create government relations opportunities, earn media. We're going to we just got an earmark in a federal appropriations bill. Don't tell me that's not a revenue generator. And oh, by the way, we're also creating a vehicle for employees to be part of our mission, which then increases retention and employee engagement. So I think it's do the work, do the thing that everyone else is passing over. And then once again, it also is my core value, which is there was not a chief corporate affairs officer before me, meaning I didn't oust someone to get where I was. I've been able to just take on things and build versus, just sort of take. And so I do think there's a way to, and again, important for me and my values, quote, empire build without necessarily having to hopefully step. There's room for everyone under my tent, right? Meaning that we can build, we don't have to sort of tear down, and hopefully then answer the question a little bit. So I guess don't be afraid of and I don't subscribe to these sort of gender, and I know there's a lot of, I think I see a lot of women on the call, these like, I'm involved in the ERG, I'm involved in other things. Untraditional allies are important, but I also don't subscribe to like, oh, well, that's a soft portfolio. People can think what they want. It's, again, what's important to you, what's the work you want to do. So I'm always a big volunteer.
I think you touched on this already, but the follow-up question to that was, when you faced opposition, how did you recruit community members to your cause?
So I think part of that is just, again, I worked harder, tried a different angle, once again, it's, sort of those basic kindergarten rules, walk in somebody else's shoes, trying to understand where other people are coming from is always, I think, the most not persuasive, but meet people where they're at, in a way that you think will resonate with them. So once again, it gets back to, I'm not afraid to be a bit personal. I'm not afraid to be hopefully vulnerable, but also get to know people on a personal level, which always makes the challenging things harder, or easier, sorry. So for me, it doesn't happen overnight. It's about building a relationship. It's incremental steps. And so it's always showing up as your authentic self. You can only fake it for so long, right? Like you can only try for so long before it's like, oh, that cracks. So it's just easier just to be your authentic self. Right. And I think people appreciate that. And it's about building relationships and then recognizing it doesn't happen overnight. I'm also someone that always leads, probably a bit, maybe sometimes too much, but I'm an open book and I'm blunt. So I don't try and play these games, especially when it comes to community members, thought leaders, or electeds of, hey, look, we all have an agenda. So kind of owning that from the beginning, I also think helps breed credibility. I'm not trying to pretend it's something that it isn't. I'm not trying to tell you, yeah, no, here's the impact. Here's how I think we could both benefit, right? And seeing things from their side and making it a win for them, even when that means maybe you don't get to take as big of a victory lap because you had to give a little bit of something to them. So for me, that's been important. Feed their ego before mine. Be really honest and transparent. Some things are transactional in work, and especially when you're doing these things, own it, because in the end they're going to figure it out anyways. So it's better to lead with authenticity and get straight to the point. And I think that's true too. One of the and you haven't asked me yet, but as always, it's incredibly difficult. And one of the hardest things I've had to do throughout my career is let people go, whether that's for cause or for budget reasons or other things. And when it's for cause, how do I still sleep at night? Is it hopefully wasn't a surprise. If it was a surprise to them, then I didn't do my job as a leader leading up to that, continually communicating about where they needed to improve, what wasn't working, et cetera, et cetera. Look, I'm not lying. It is always a surprise, right? It's still a gulp. That doesn't mean it's not a gulp but I haven't done my job if it's like, what, this is out of left field. And I think it's the same in building relationships and getting community members or electeds or other folks on your side. Shouldn't be a surprise. The first time they hear from you shouldn't be when you're asking for them to defeat a bill or support something or to do something, right? You've hopefully been building that relationship and that clear communication and finding out what they need and what motivates them along the way.
All right, I think I can sneak in one final question with 5 minutes left. So Beth,
Yes, I'm
if
ready.
you could give one piece of advice to your 30-year-old self, what would it be? Let's end on a fun note with this.
I don't know that my answer is going to be fun, Lauren. Now that's like so it's actually, so I'm glad you asked the question. And I actually said this when I was talking to my husband about this. So I'm gonna be really honest. My 30-year-old self, and I told you I was working as a chief of staff to the mayor. I was working at that time. I had a great job, but I was also working to overcome some of the things that I never built as habits earlier in my life. So here's my advice. And I'm going to say it really directly, and then you can all sort of apply it to your own life. 30 is the time to work out some of your own shit. So when I, sort of my 30-year-old self, I got a personal trainer for the first time, and sort of for me, like building that exercise habit and whatever was really important, and some of that stuff. But also, I wish I'd frozen my eggs. That's the truth. What I would say to my 30-year-old self is, and if you're not a female who ever thinks you're going to have kids, maybe later in life, there may be a friend or a family member that you want to be able to give those eggs to. And if you're, a male or you're in a same-sex relationship, maybe your partner. But that's the truth. That is the one thing, as I look at everything that I would have done differently. And frankly, I was doing a lot right at 30. I was saving for retirement, even though I didn't have a formal 401k plan. I set one up, from Fidelity separately. I was putting money in my 401k. I was exercising, I was dating, I was having fun, I was traveling, but I also had a really good job. I would say I actually had a really good balance. But that's the one thing, because I wasn't, that wasn't the goal. And I wasn't in a relationship at that point that, I was going to get married. And then frankly, my career kind of took off. And I kept following that. And so that's what I would do differently. And that's, some of you have heard me say that before in other forums, but that's the biggest advice I wish someone had told me. Because I do think I did a lot of things right at that period, and continued to do right. But then when I got to a different phase of my life, I unfortunately didn't have that choice anymore. So I'm not a big believer in regrets. Life works out for a reason, and I'm thrilled with where my path has landed. So I don't know if that was a fun note, Lauren, I'm sorry, but have fun, because I was having a lot of fun at 30, which is why I wasn't focused on that.
Yeah,
so that would be my advice. That would be my advice. And yes, if you're not already contributing to your 401k or something else, put in those solid. I'm not saying you need to go buy a house. Don't stress yourself out. But set aside those foundation. It's really about the foundation. So for me, it's the foundation of healthy habits, nutrition, working out. 30 is also probably when those like hangovers and happy hours start to feel a little more detrimental. So like set your healthy foundation, but also think about that a bit more holistically, just beyond your 401k and your nest egg. Think about that is some of your the choices that you may want to have later, because it's all about keeping your choices open, right?
Right.
So
I think you've left us all with a lot to think about over the weekend. I know I'll be thinking about what my work-life balance looks like, and I'm turning 30 next year, and just thinking about, I'm very career driven, but what are some other things that maybe are on the back burner, and for me that may be affected down the road. Solid advice, Beth. Thank you so much for your
and have
honesty.
fun.
Yeah.
Fun is important.
As we are wrapping up, I just wanted to thank everyone for attending today's Lunch with a Leader. And please make sure to follow Emerging Leaders Society on their website and their social channels, where they share all of their future events. I will leave the links in this chat. And thank you, Beth, so much for joining us today and for such a great conversation. And I hope you all have a fantastic weekend.
Thank you all very much. And feel free to email me and reach out if I can be helpful to any of you, or, expand on any of this. But thank you guys for the opportunity. This was a lot of fun.
It was.
Bye, guys.
All right. Have a great afternoon. Happy Friday, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.